that we can share some of these points with other staff. But at that point, again, we're so happy you made it out tonight, and that you're participating in helping us come up with some concepts for this park. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. And thank you for, as you mentioned, so I just started recording at this point. I missed the very eloquent introduction you gave. I'm sorry, my bad. At this point, I'd like to ask the executive director of Storefront to jump in and maybe do a few words, if that's all right.
Yeah, thanks, Bert. Thanks, Chris. Good evening, everyone. My name is Sean Ballin. I am the executive director at Storefront for Community Design. And if you are not familiar with us, we are a community design nonprofit design center that's located right downtown on Broad Street. We are also located in the north side for our Youth Innovation Center. But what we do is we operate 3 community-based studio programs. So our first program is Youth Innovation. So I spoke to the north side location. We have our 6 Points Innovation Center in Highland Park neighborhood where we do our youth programming. We have the Community Design Studio that we offer pro bono design assistance. And then we have our Civic Engagement Studio where we do community engagement. So this is one of those community engagement efforts. We do workshops, everything else kind of to bring our stakeholders together to discuss projects. And what's interesting is that if you're not familiar with Storefront, really, we started as like this pro bono design service, and that's our design session. And this project with the Westover Hills Park is actually a project that started through our design session and through additional efforts with PRCF. We were able to get additional work to turn this into a community engagement effort. So here we are, and we're also excited to be celebrating our 10-year anniversary this year. So be on the lookout for what's coming this year and how to get involved. And we're hoping, maybe by the end of this year, we can all gather somehow with our vaccinations and move forward. So we'll see, but fingers crossed. But for now, we're excited to be here virtually and looking forward to see what you all have to say.
Thanks, Sean. And we also have one of our other program managers from Storefront here, Anya Sherbakova, is on the call. Again, as I said, I'm Bert Pennick. I'm an architect here in Richmond. I actually also live in the neighborhood just down at the corner of New Kent and Westover Hills, and a volunteer with Storefront. And Jill, did you want to introduce yourself as well?
Sure. Good evening. I'm Jill Nolt, landscape architect with Water Street Studio, and I live on the other side of the river, but live in the city and have kids that go to public schools and use the public parks. So this is near and dear to me as well.
So I want to lay out sort of what our goal is, certainly this evening, as Chris said, is to, one, sort of talk about some of the program elements that we've been given. I think, as Chris said, the Parks and Rec has done a lot of outreach, and there's been a lot of input and feedback thus far. So they shared all of that with us to get started. And our goal, again, is to present sort of a first blush at some of that, and then to hear your comments and reactions and goals and visions and all the things you want to pack in there. And then we are charged with going back and coalescing that into something that is more refined to, as Chris said, they can start talking about capital fundraising for this.
Be together from anywhere, only from Sling. Get the best of cable for the best price.
I'm gonna
comfort.
I'm gonna mute that right now. Okay. All right. So this is an aerial of the existing park. And Jill, did you want to jump in on some stuff?
Yeah, I'm sure all of you are familiar with the park. It's often good to start with an aerial view and just highlight some of the existing conditions. As you all know, this 10-acre park is largely interior of this block. It's bound on Clarence Street with single family residential and then commercial, some new development on Forest Hill, but really no direct street access on those sides. The playground that's at the corner of Jank and Forest Hill is technically public, Parks and Rec, and then it sits next to a playground that is part of the public school ground, RPS zone. Next to the playground is the asphalt section that's set up as a bike driving route. And then there are the 2 ball fields that you can see from the aerial moving page right. There are tennis courts, 2 different types of tennis courts. I believe the ones furthest north or page to the bottom of the page have the nicer surface, but they do get a lot of leaf litter from the trees. And then in the corner, the oldest tennis courts have been transformed into a skate park that is existing. There is an alleyway or a public right of way, or maybe you can move your cursor over, that does give public access to the park. It's very nondescript at this point, but there is a way that you can be on public property and get from Westover Hills Boulevard to the park. So for orientation, these are the limits of the park and our starting point for the discussion this evening.
And during this evening, as I said, I will be asking, and you can do this anytime you want and throw into the chat or an email to anybody, if there's a word or a phrase that might sum up your vision for this park, if you were to go to, let's pick a city, Roanoke, Virginia, and say, when you come to Richmond, come to Westover Park because, and there's something you're going to fill in there. That would be really helpful for us. Okay. All right. So, so this is kind of the list of program elements and some current usage and some desires for the park that we received. The idea of one, just connecting through the park, as Jill said, it's pretty much an interior park. So this idea of connecting it from Forest Hill to Westover Hills Boulevard entrance. A loop trail, I think, is pretty cool. Jill and I sort of walked it, and what did we figure out? It was 500 or 600 miles, or is that how it felt? No, it was okay. It was half a mile, kind of loop trail that we could kind of do. The tennis courts are used. I'm a user of the tennis courts as well. Wall ball football. The makeshift dog park in the northeast corner that I think used to be tennis courts, but is now sort of a completely fenced grass area. And the skateboarders have sort of claimed use of the one's kiddie courts now with some makeshift apparatus set up in there. I will say they're very respectful too. When we're on the tennis courts and they're there, everybody's cognizant of keeping the little gate closed so that there aren't random tennis balls or errant skateboards sort of flying across. That's kind of cool. And then there's goal of new items: pickleball, basketball, skate features, the dog park, tables and benches, bathroom or replacing the bathroom, adding concessions and parking and lighting. So that's kind of the list that we've started with. If there are things there that aren't included, again, just let us know what you think. Or if there are things there that need further explanation, throw that in too.
Hi, this is Diana Garland. I'm the ambassador from the USA Pickleball Association.
Hi.
And this COVID pandemic has probably doubled the participation in pickleball. And I don't know, it says pickleball courts, but are there plans for how many courts? We need more courts and we need lighted courts, especially during the summer when the weather's hot.
Well, Ms. Garland, how are you going to steal my thunder? I'm only three
I'm
slides
sorry.
in before I've even gotten to a plan.
Okay. I didn't know whether.
Yeah. So these are it's messing with me. So these are absolutely all the things that we tried to put into this plan. And as I said, at the end of it, we'll give this plan to Parks and Rec for them to share broadly for further comments and evaluations. But this is going to be our first blush. I am going to try, and I say try because I haven't done it before, launch a quick poll, which I think, and Sean, correct me if I'm wrong, I can move through this presentation while the poll is still out.
Yeah, you should be.
Okay. And it's simply sort of these things, just sort of the things that are important to you. So let's see. So I think it's like you can multiple choice. You don't have to choose just a thing, but just so we can sort of take a metric of where we are. All right, and okay. So
all right, let me jump in here.
Please do.
Yeah. So before we get into specifics, and we have both some images and a concept to show you and get your feedback. But before we do that, I just want to touch on some high level best practices for parks, things that we want to keep in mind and make sure that we're solving and including as we move forward with a design and a redesign for the park. I think first and foremost, we want the park to be accessible. And that happens at two different scales. That happens within the park. We want to make sure it's easy to walk, roll, whether that's a wheelchair or a bike or a skateboard or rollerblades. We want to make sure that you can move through the park at ease. But we also want to make sure that you can get there from the city, whether you're coming from the north, south, east, or west, whether you're driving a car, you know where to park, and there's ample parking to arrive and be at the park, or whether you're coming by bus or walking on the city sidewalks. We want to make sure it's connected to the infrastructure of the park. So that's going to be really important that we make sure we make those connections to the surrounding neighborhoods. And then we want to make sure that the entrances are highly visible, that it's clear that you're entering the park, you know where you're going, it's welcoming, and it brings you into the park. We're going to be looking for as many opportunities for entrances into this park as possible, just because it's so interior right now. We want to find as many entrances as possible so it's welcoming from every direction. We want to make sure there are diversity of uses, and best practices say that you should have 10 uses for a thriving, vibrant park. And so that's, we're going to want to talk about what those 10 are. We're going to see if we can get to 10 this evening. And we want to make sure it's a diversity of uses for a variety of people, variety of ages, variety of activities, a variety of mobilities. So we want to look for that variety and that diversity. And Bert mentioned this one before. We want to make sure it has a strong neighborhood identity. We want, when we talk about Westover Hills Park, we want everybody to know what that is, and it has a unique characteristic that is this specific park. Human scale is really important because we want to make sure that this is designed for the people who use it. So that's creating spaces that feel comfortable to be in, feel safe to be in, have amenities like benches and trash cans, and the next two seem simple, but are really essential for a successful park, and that's both shade and lighting. You want to make sure that we have both so that it can be used for a variety of seasons and for a variety of times throughout the day. And then the last is what we're doing now. We think it's really important to have community participation, that you all have a voice in how this park gets designed and moves forward into its next life.
Thanks, Jill. So with that in mind, and then with Jill and I, with those ideas in mind, with the previous slides, program elements that you've already outlined in mind, we kind of walked around the park to sort of develop this kind of organizing diagram, but also knowing that there are some infrastructure issues with the park that may need to be addressed. But talking about the first element of entrances, I think that, you know, what is needed is a clear identity for an entrance to the park, right? Now I threw in the slide on the left because one of the last strips I took before the Pandera, and that's the name we're going with. We call it the Pandera. That's Pandera. Was to Japan, right? And it was just there was no mistaking what those gates represented anywhere you went. Jill, do you want to throw in?
So I think a couple of things to note in the other slides here is in the bottom slide, you do see a fence line that, you know, delineates the public streetscape from the park. But notice it's not a tall fence. It's not obstructing your view. It still maintains high visibility into the park. And it's organized in such a way with paving material and lighting and visibility to welcome you in off of the street. So I think we're going to look for opportunities to do that.
Yeah, so that gateway into the park, I think, is just the first part of the identity of it. One of the things, you know, looking at the two playgrounds adjacent to the school, we had some thoughts about how those kinds of things might be improved and better integrated. For example, there was a lot of I think asphalt areas beneath the tree canopies. There are some fencing issues and some other things, but I'll leave it there.
Yeah, I think we want to look at some creative ways to make the playgrounds more natural, whether it's working with a local, you know, timber company to do natural playground systems, or whether it's simply incorporating movable chairs and tree trunks as a way to be more tactile with the playground environment. And I think we could have some fun using landform and, you know, maybe unusual materials to create play space.
And what I liked in the upper left image is just this true integrated sort of seating space. It doesn't feel like distinct and apart from each other, but that sort of integrated feel. So this, I think what is starting to take shape maybe with some of the commercial development that's happening along Forest Hill, and then some of the way the spaces are there already, and picking up on this idea of sort of connecting trails is I'll call it a thought of a organizing walk, an organizing pathway, you know, sort of the broad park boulevard through the space, you know, with opportunities for different activities tethered to it.
Yeah, it really, I mean, the promenade is a stroll. It's a public space, but in a linear form. So it can it can get you from point A to point B, but it can also be a place to meet someone, a place to sit and have lunch and see and be seen. It could be on the edge of some of the other program spaces. It can provide that element of shade and seating and give some human scale to edges or parts of the park. So we know we have some drainage issues on the site, in particular on the side behind the recent developments along Forest Hill Avenue. There are some design strategies that we can use to collect that water, maybe do a native rain garden and really make it a didactic landscape that's also kind of teaching ideas, teaching and understanding about stormwater, how it connects to the James River from this location, and can solve the infrastructure problem of that wet area.
So the existing shelter and concession and bathroom facility near the tennis courts, which again, I will confess, Jill asked me if I'd ever used them. I can say no, I haven't. In the 25 years I've been in the neighborhood playing tennis at those courts. But I think rethinking where they are, first of all, so that one, it becomes part of that sort of main boulevard we were talking about, that makes it sort of accessible from most of the activities in the park. And then it also maybe wants to have that kind of visibility and safety element to it. Ms. Nolt, you want to say more? Because I usually don't say enough.
No, you got it that time.
Oh, okay. On the landscape. And Sean, I know you are executive director of Storefront, but also a landscape architect. And so, I invite you to throw in.
Chime in. Yeah, I mean, I think seating is going to be really important in this park, both built-in fixed seating, but also a variety of seating. Movable tables and chairs go a long way to give ownership of a space. I mean, it doesn't take, it's fun to watch people use parks with movable chairs because they will come up to the chair, move the chair 2 inches and sit down. But it's that simple movement of reorienting the chair and sitting down that they claim kind of ownership of the space while they're there. And that goes a long way for respect of the park. It just allows for a diversity of uses. You could organize a meeting like tonight there. You could organize the chairs in a variety of ways. So I think, a variety of seating that's both built-in, fixed, and flexible just allows for a variety of uses.
So I know there's a lot of conversation too about sort of the skate amenity in this park, but I think it's a really lovely integration of the sort of amorphic forms into the park. And when we are intentional about what it is and where it is, I think it becomes more of an asset than anything. And I side-eye kind of the chat, and there's a lot of pickleball discussion for sure. But then also on the list,
I'm definitely taking note of all this stuff just to bring up right before the Q&A.
Okay, thank you, Sean. I got excited about sort of just the opportunity also of the sports courts as Also, just a public art expression. This project, and I forget. I think the lower right is in Manhattan, and I think the upper left is in the Midwest, and I think it's Michigan, but I don't remember exactly. But so reintroducing basketball into the park in sort of a fun and clever way is an opportunity. But and again, the pickleball courts, of course. So as I said, we walked in and figured out, sort of using the sort of entire loop of the park was about a half-mile course, which is kind of cool because actually the way we did it was sort of to walk the edges of the park, but then walk down the sidewalk in front of the school along Jank Road, which kind of takes you by the playgrounds and then re-enter the park back in at that entrance and walk the boulevard, as I mentioned, and kind of the perimeter of all the activities. And Jill, I'm going to let you talk about the torture machines on the right because I don't know what.
Sure. I mean, some of the other parks in the city do have these Vita course exercise equipment. I'd be really interested to hear from the group this evening if that's something of interest in this park. But I do think this walking loop that's connecting the variety of different program is essential, whether it has the equipment sprinkled around it to do your pull-ups and your sit-ups and so on. I'd be interested to hear whether that's of interest. But I think the walking path, like the one on the left, narrower but wide enough that you can pass somebody coming from the other direction, or two people can walk side by side, I think is an important connectivity that the park deserves.
Yeah, so this is how Jill and I, this is how we work sort of as sort of inspiration images, illustrative images to show sort of what we think we've heard and what our ideas are to put down on paper. And then I would encourage you, even if after this, in addition to comments, if there are illustrative images that you have that you want to share, that would be great. Okay, so this is our first pass at how to lay out the park. It's oriented like the other map you saw. Let's see. So Forest Hill Avenue, Westover Hills here, Jank Road. The first thing I want to point is sort of where we sort of noted the entrances, whether they're primary or secondary or pedestrian or whatever, but they are sort of the entrances into the park. So there's the one off Westover Hills that I think Joe, was it I cannot remember the right of way, 20 foot? Is it 20 foot right of way that alley was? Yeah. So there's a 20 foot right of way here. And we think, with a little bit of effort to mark it. I mean, there's a small sign, I think that says Westover Tennis Courts right about here, but working on the whole identity of the park. And then this leading to into the park and replacing the concessions and bathroom building there with parking. So the parking is no longer sort of, I think there's 3 or 4 spaces that have been allocated for use by park users, but bringing parking into this spot. A bigger move is to really rethink what is arguably the most predominant public-facing corner of the park. When we think about those entrance images that we showed earlier, how we can really take advantage of this corner in creating sort of a primary identity for the park. And a sort of larger move is to create additional parking for the park, but that also could serve the community center where the former sort of bike training course is just, you can kind of see it ghosted out below it. And hopefully working with the neighbor of the property here to sort of figure out a vehicular entrance, and then again expanding the parking here, and then another entrance off of Jank Road, because I think what Jill and I noted was that, you know, the park should feel like it's accessible from as many points as possible, given its limited sort of visual access to the streets as well. And so then creating an entrance deliberately here just south of the school off of Jank Road, but also a suggestion that there might be a slightly reconfigured use of the parking to one expand and improve parking for the school and create additional parking at the rear. For example, if you were going to use these for the multi-purpose fields or the softball or what have you on this court. So the number twos on this plan indicate where we think parking opportunities are. The playgrounds here, we've talked about how we might consider improving the playgrounds, but leaving them sort of where they are, but then sort of this sort of brownish line here is a representation of, again, that promenade that then does some other things like the bioretention and dealing with some of the stormwater issues there. And then there's another right now opening in the gate, or opening in the fence behind the coffee shop and the brewery, right about here. That's another access point. Oh, am I pointing and not?
Yeah, I can't see your
showing.
cursor, so
Oh,
I'm going to
God.
annotate for you.
Oh God, I'm sorry. Jeez. All right, let me see. Thank you. So entrance here.
There you go. You got it.
Entrance there. Entrance here. Thank you. Entrance there. So expanding parking here, connected to the parking at the coffee shop and brewery here. And so that's what I'm working with those. This parking, sort of suggesting that there's an improved layout and more efficient layout for the parking adjacent to the school that then gets expanded and provides a connection to additional parking that is used by the school and the park for that matter. So if you were, again, coming, use a multi-purpose field, it might be more convenient to park here. And then the parking that is between the two tennis courts now where the concession building is added here, so that parking is removed from the private property of the church. And then I spoke.
And Bert, I'll just chime in here. You know, when you're talking about parking, that's vehicular, but of course we'll want bike racks and, you know, curb cuts and accessible entrances for pedestrians and cyclists at all of these entrances as well.
And then, as we know, so the promenade, sort of the main connector to from a new enhanced entrance through the park, running along here. So that boulevard through the space, that tree-lined optional seating and those kinds of things located there, with picnic shelters, facilities, those kinds of things. And then the red dotted line is a Vita course. Maybe that's the half-mile Vita course that we spoke of. But then along this edge would be starting with a dog park, perhaps. And I think, yeah, there it is. I know this is, as big as 4,500 square feet of what that space is. So that's roughly where the current use or as the dog park is sort of being used right now in this corner that's expanded a little bit. Then basketball courts, pickleball courts, the existing tennis courts, and the wall ball that's located back here. So that sort of edge of activities all sort of aligned there. And what else am I missing, Jill?
So you all have noticed very quickly that we went from 2 ball fields to 1. I think we're looking for your input on that, but we have kept the one that's predominantly oriented to the right solar orientation, and it does open up a little bit more flexible space for a multi-use. Maybe it's a soccer field, maybe it's a just field sports in general, but we are looking for some feedback on that. And is this softball or is this baseball? What works best, and where does the interest lie?
Yeah, so I think that kind of.
And did you point out the skate park, Bert? The skate park is in number 7. So maybe it takes a little bit more of an organic form. Maybe it doesn't have a fence around it. So you have a designated path that loops around it, but it's more open and visible from those surrounding areas.
And for reference, the cell tower and those things are right there. So let's see. Yeah, okay. So that's our first salvo for opening up a conversation about the future of the park at Westover Hills. And at this point, I'd like to open the floor. I will say the most connecting paths followed by followed by bathrooms and concessions, followed by pickleball. Excellent. Okay.
That's great.
Thanks, Bert. I figured I would just I've been taking a pass at looking at the chat box and kind of wrapping up. There's a lot of questions that are coming through. But I think some of the basic things that we saw coming through the chat box, that there's a lot of conversation about. A lot of people like the idea of rain garden, permeable pavers was talked about a lot. Maintaining the trees, that was a big discussion towards the beginning, just with the hot summer months. Some permaculture, there were some questions about the football field, if that was being maintained, and just kind of how that was being maintained for activities. Lighting, lighting is always a concern, whether it's at the pickleball courts. There's a lot of discussion of the pickleball courts, or just within the park itself. Thinking about planting with native plants. There was some discussion about flowers, bright colors, how does this play into the maintenance piece? And I think our Recreation and Parks Department can talk more to kind of that maintenance piece, because that's always a challenge when we're looking at design. Seating, flexible seating, restrooms, splash park, there was some talk to that, public art. Basically everything that you all put in the plan is everything that the community kind of voiced opinions for and just had and approved towards that. One of the things that was brought up was grills as well, grills and picnic tables, and some thoughts towards accessibility. So a lot of good comments from the group, but just starting from the beginning and just going through some of the questions, I think one of the questions right off the bat was, what is the timeline to break ground? So I think this is a good opportunity for maybe Chris or Ryan to speak a little bit to kind of the process of the master plan. Not to put you on the spot.
No, that's all good. I was just turning my video back on. So as Chris was saying at the beginning of this, we really want to get a master plan kind of solidified. This is the first step in that process. Getting your feedback, making some tweaks to this, putting this presentation out so that more people in the public can see it and offer feedback, come back together with an update via storefront that will kind of take the considerations that we're hearing in the chat and that you're saying today and make sure that we're taking those into consideration. Once we have that master plan kind of signed off on by everybody's feedback, what we'll try to do then is take it through the Urban Design Committee. The Urban Design Committee looks at the character and extent of these public processes and these public designs, and will allow us to kind of solidify that master plan as what is on tap for the Westover Hills Park. At that point, it allows us and you all hopefully to assist us in advocating for inclusion in the capital improvement budget so that we can get some dollars put directly toward this in our city's capital improvement budget. That would be kind of the next steps going forward. Again, there would be more opportunity for public comment in the next iteration of this, and then again at the Urban Design Committee. And once it's settled there, we will just be putting on our advocate hats to try to find the funding for it. So once we have the design kind of pretty much figured out, we can price out what it would cost to do this work. So we'll have a budget amount, a rough budget amount of what it would take to do this work after this design process is concluded. And then from there, we'll work with your council member to see how we can be best advocates for getting that included in the budget. I hope I answered that question.
I think so.
One of the questions, actually, one of the comments I found, Richmond is getting known as a pickleball destination. I did not realize that, but I do know that it's becoming very popular. A good question that was about the school. One of the questions is, how are you working to partner with and engage the school community? And in particular, are there any conversations happening with the school division about how it can best be integrated without limiting a future school remodel or rebuild?
Yeah, and I can talk a little bit to that, but we definitely will be working with RPS through this. Any site that is the part of the school site for school use will not be impacted by park use per the MOUs that we already have with schools. So we would work to make sure that that MOU was updated between parks and schools on specifically how this site was utilized and under what hours, making sure that the main uses of the site are there for the kids at school when they're there at school. And then having the site open when we're talking about parking and other things when the school is not in use. So that would be something we take through our memorandum of understanding process with Richmond Public Schools as this moves on.
Another question was, is this presentation going to be shared? That was a question to you, Ryan.
Yes, this presentation will be shared as well as the video recording of this presentation. And our communications team will help us get that out via our social media within the coming days after we get the final from tonight.
Great. An interesting question on the kind of private-public partnerships. Can public-private partnerships be forged with those businesses along Westover Hills Boulevard? People will probably poach those spaces either way, which could be a problem. I don't know if this was any thoughts to this in the design.
I think that could be an issue for sure. And we're definitely open to working with the businesses there to establish what it looks like for these spots to be park spots. Again, we're definitely open to that conversation.
Question regarding the skate park. So would be interested in knowing who would be involved in the skate park design. We really should look to have this park offer some options, not at others. So I know like old school half pipe, there's other discussions of different types of the skate, what should be included in the skate park.
And again, I think we're wide open to looking at the park users and the skaters, kind of leading what that conversation can be and what we should be thinking about when we're pricing out options for this element of the park.
Great. Back to the school. So what will be the effect of more traffic parking when kids are arriving, departing from the school? Are there measures in place or even design measures in place to help ease safety and conflict issues?
So, I will say part of the intent was not to create new access points for traffic, but to use what was existing for traffic in and out of the park around the school. I think the intersection at Jank and Forest Hill probably needs some study as to how it best works from a crossing kind of thing. I think there's maybe a little bit of traffic priority over pedestrian priority in the signalization. But I think that from a traffic conflict with school kids, I think we've tried to think about that as minimal impact as possible.
Great. Is there a question about the baseball field? Is there actual need for the baseball softball field? If not, that area could be used for more green space or flexible use.
Sorry, ask that one more time. You broke up on me there.
Just if there is a need for the baseball softball field. I know that there's plenty of fields around the city, but there's certain, I know that that department kind of has a base of this. So
yeah, I think, with our baseball and softball fields, we have heard from a lot of neighbors and residents, they don't see them in use. We do have users who use these fields at different times throughout the year, and working with our recreational staff who run baseball and coordinate the use of these fields. We do know that T-ball, softball, and baseball, all within the last couple of years, have utilized this site for their recreational activities. So there is some use. I don't know that it's as much use as we'd love to see, but there is definitely use there. And I think that the football, the youth football definitely uses this field. It's a program field as part of youth football. So having both of those fields with the different seasons, having access to that, I think is really important to the flexibility of the site.
So one of the participants asked if we can consider more than 6 pickleball courts. Chesterfield Technical Center has 12 and it's still not enough. So I don't know if there's been any studies as far as within the city of Richmond. I don't know if there's been kind of studies as to where more pickleball courts need to be placed, because I know we've done that with tennis courts before.
Can I ask, this is Jill with Water Street. Can I ask a question relating to that? Is there a minimum number of courts that are required for a tournament style play of pickleball?
Hey, Jill. This is Chris Terrell. I'm with the Pickleball Club of Chesterfield County, but I live on the city line, so I'm kind of technically city.
We'll let you join the meeting tonight.
Appreciate it.
And this is Diana. This is Diana Garland. I'm the RVA Pickleball Ambassador. So I let Chris speak,
Great.
and then I'll take a turn.
Okay, so I know there's been a lot of pickleball comments because there's a lot of us on here. Just to back up a little bit, 4 years ago, there were only 8 courts in the entire city of Richmond. That was thanks to some volunteer work done within Chesterfield. It has mushroomed and taken off, not just in Richmond, but all over the country, but especially in Richmond because we got a head start on everybody else, especially Chesterfield. Chesterfield has 26 dedicated courts in 3 locations, the smallest of which has 6 courts. The second largest has 8, the third largest has 12. Henrico has 2. They have an 8 and a 12. Richmond has 2. They have a 2 and a 6. If you're going to have tournaments, you need a minimum of 12, and preferably larger. The tournaments that are being played in the Richmond area, there are at least two that are happening each year now on a regular basis, are happening in Henrico because they access Pouncey Tract, which has 12 dedicated courts, and then they'll overflow either to the Chesterfield Technical Center with 12 more, or to the Springs that has 8. So while 6 is really nice, and it's almost the minimum you want to build in a place, 6 is not going to get it done from a tournament perspective.
Great. That's good to hear. I mean, I think it's going to be a larger question with Parks and Rec of where does the pickleball tournament center happen? Is Westover Hills the ideal place for it, or does that happen at some other park? And if it's a priority to happen in this park, then what I'm hearing is we should be looking for space for 12 courts.
Minimum of 12.
I think we'll need further discussion about it, but it's good to know what that threshold is.
Yeah, the tournament that was held in October used all 12 courts at Pouncey Track for 3 days and used the courts at the Springs for at least 1 day. They got rained out 1 day, but it's that makes 20 courts more of the ideal side for a large tournament. And that tournament had about 400 entries. People came from all over the state and from other states, North Carolina, Maryland, and somebody said there was somebody from overseas.
Right.
So, it's, and they used what they did was, they used a combination of the courts at Pouncey Tract and the courts at the Springs. So, if you had 12 at your primary place, then you had 8 somewhere else, or, minimum 6, like at Forest Hill, that would be good. The problem with Forest Hill is no lights. So wherever you want this tournament center to be, there have to be lighted courts, because a tournament can run all day from like 7 in the morning till 9, 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
Another key consideration at Forest Hill is the lack of parking.
Yes.
There are 6 courts at Forest Hill, which holds 24 people, but I've been at Forest Hill when there were 40 people there. There were 16 people waiting to get on the court.
Yes.
Yeah.
And another
Diana and Chris, would you be willing just to share by way of an email or something like that, some of this basic criteria? I think it's, like I said, I'm not certain we'll be able to solve this at Westover Hills, but like having that criteria and discussing it at a higher level with Parks and Rec, I think is important if pickleball is going to continue to grow.
Yes.
But we want to look at it.
Continue to grow. It's growing at about 11% rate, which is making it the fastest growing recreational sport. And the pandemic just brought people out left and right. The walking path around Forest Hill Park was a major source of new interest in pickleball, because people were out walking and would walk by and say, "Oh, what's this?" And then they'd go out and buy, cheap paddles and some balls and start to try to teach themselves. So it's a big, it's not going to get smaller by any means for quite some time. The other thing that can be used is there are a lot of youth programs beginning to happen. So, the pickleball courts can be used by the school too. But the parking issue is really, really critical. The Forest Hill is really bad when things are crowded. And when they have another event there, which, we want them to have multi-use, of course, then you really are squeezing people to park into the neighborhoods, and that creates some issues with the neighborhood.
Right. So sorry to derail Sean there. I just had that pickleball question. Sean, can I give it back to you to continue to go through the questions in the chat?
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's a lot of chat going on in the chat box just regarding pickleball, and and that's, some of y'all are asking, is this going to be a pickleball court? And, that's why we have these community engagement efforts, so that you can all voice your thoughts and your ideas.
Absolutely.
It needs to be one way or another. So one of the questions, will there be bike racks? We talked about bike racks during the presentation. So yes, that's definitely something. Another question was, are you partnering with other local orgs like Reforest Richmond to help get more community engagement in maintaining the park and its trees, plants, etc.? I was just gonna say, I know from past experience, and just especially with Parks and Rec, as this is a Parks and Rec project, but at the same time, a lot of it can be community led. So there are definitely opportunities from taking this master plan and moving it into next phases. So for instance, just looking at the Carter Jones Fonticello Park, not too far from this location, they had the Fonticello Food Forest that kind of came into fruition. And there's a lot of other things that can be community led. So there's opportunities for that partnership with organizations in the future. Will the ball field be fenced and locked when not in use? It's a little detailed, but I think that's a question just for in other parks. I don't know, Ryan, if you can speak to that.
Ryan actually had to step away for a family emergency.
Oh gosh.
So I'm Tamara Jenkins. I am the public information manager for Parks and Recreation. It depends on the field. I can say that. I think historically Westover had not been necessarily locked out for public access, just because with the attachment to the school uses it during the day. And then you're still getting in and out of the tennis courts on the back side of the facility. I'm not sure with this new project if that's something we're going to be looking at, but we can just drop that into the question to see how it's going to look moving forward.
Great. One of the questions is, or just addressing the question of the lack of parking on Westover Hills Boulevard side. I don't know if there's any questions or thoughts to that.
Is that should there be parking on? At this, I can't, it's like 12 or so parking spaces. What we were trying to do is work with the spaces between the courts without extending into the playing fields. So trying to sort of find some boundaries there. I mean, you can have certain more parking with the sacrifice of something else.
Well, there's also an opportunity for some community partnerships if those businesses or the church there along Westover Hills would be willing to share their parking spaces or do a kind of flexible use at certain times of the day. There would be a way that we could increase parking, even though it wouldn't technically be on the park. But it would take a good relationship with those businesses to do that.
I did see a question come through with just someone asked if any discussions have been made with this park or any other parks around the city to meet the Sustainable Sites Initiative, which is basically it's like LEED, but for landscape. I don't know if there's anything that's been discussed in the Parks Department. I don't know, Tamara, if you can speak to that at all, if you know anything.
I do not, unfortunately.
Okay.
That would be great. We'd love to do that.
Yeah, I think one of the comments, I did see a comment come in, just a suggestion or an idea for like using how you could potentially use the skate park as like a capturing stormwater and so forth. Like, how does that become kind of a feature in the park itself?
Sean, may I interrupt you?
Go for it.
So my name's Deanna Fair and I'm an educator and I'm also a parent here in the area. And I just want to share my opinion. I drive through that space all the time, turn Forest Hill and up Jag to go to grandma's house and back, and I've been doing it for 11 years. And I just like the vibe of the park as I've passed through throughout the years, that it's very family centered, very kid centered. There's churches that I've seen that hold events in the playground area. I live right across the street from Forest Hill and it's got a good park, but it's so far from the main street and the parking, and there's no bathrooms. So I like that this park area is close to the school and could potentially have some more welcoming bathrooms. But I really, and I do want the kids to learn how to play pickleball. I've never heard about it until recently. And like I've seen the courts, but I really don't want, I would hate to see it lose that family child-centered view that it has, especially being right next to the school. I feel like that just makes a lot of sense.
So our intent was to cut, while these are shown as sort of hard lines, just so you can see where the fields are. I mean, imagine the line's not there, and that this is pretty much a multi-use just field, right? But and the sort of by the spirit of the playground sort of connected to this sort of wide walkway where the bathrooms and the shelters and the benches and other things are, sort of gives you kind of I think a continued sort of family multi-purpose kind of space. Going back to Jill's point, sort of having those multiple of uses throughout the park, I think without sacrificing some of the things you just said.
They had 100 new parking spaces. It's amazing when you look at this overview. You're like, they can fit all that in.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
They were just saying at the amount of parking spaces that you could fit in here. I do, one of the, I just totally lost it. The questions are starting to slow down. So if anybody does have anything that they wanted to kind of speak to specifically, there's a lot of discussion about the school. So if there's any other parents that have any other thoughts, specifically to the school, I see Cindy, you raised your hand. So if you want to go ahead and speak.
Can you hear me? I'm
Yes.
not good. Okay. The only thing I know about the school is it's in our neighborhood. I live a few blocks behind it. I know how terrible the traffic is around here. In fact, I know how frequently people run the stop signs around this area. It's a link between Midlothian and here and it's to downtown, so you don't have to pay the tolls. So there's a tremendous amount of traffic. There's also a neighborhood right behind here. It's a neighborhood of houses that, don't want a lot of noise or trash, any more trash than we already have. God knows we have enough to fill up a tanker every day. And I'm concerned about the parking. I know the church has already put down that there, if you park there, you get towed. It's a neighborhood place. And this is a neighborhood, the bigger neighborhood includes very wealthy people and extremely poor people. There are even people living in the woods. This is an area that needs to serve this neighborhood. It has been serving this neighborhood. It needs to continue to serve this neighborhood. If we have a ball field that's locked, like the ball fields at Monticello Park, you're taking up acres of space right there that we won't be able to use anymore. So that's my comment. Traffic and parking, and consider everyone in this neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rakita. I see your hand raised.
Yes, my name is Rakita Jones, and I'm representing Westover Hills Elementary tonight. And I put the comment in, so you may have read it already, but I just want to reiterate that I would love for our school community to be considered in this. And, if there is a survey that may have gone out, or I'm new, so I came in July, so I'm not sure if I have missed a survey, but it would be nice to have a survey that we can send out or partner with you all to share with our school community as you're selecting components, because we want to make sure, as Cindy just stated, that it serves the entire community. And especially that's representative of the demographics of our school as well. So I think that's critical. And I can put my email in the chat. I would love to partner with you all just to for us to make sure that we have a voice in it, just because it's just directly connected with our school community.
Thanks, Rakita. And I know that that was one of the questions too that's recently come up, is like, has the school community been surveyed? And then also, has any thoughts to the neighborhood being surveyed? So I do know with Parks and Rec, and Tamara, you might be able to speak to this, that, once there's kind of a plan in place, at least something tangible to look at, it's much easier to get thoughts and ideas from the community. I don't know if that's something that y'all have talked about, Bert, Jill.
We had talked about it briefly, and yes, you are correct, Sean, that once we actually have some sorts of a plan in place, it's easier to be able to get that feedback from the community. We were talking earlier prior to the meeting about actually setting up a survey link to be able to send out so that those that had were not able to attend the meeting tonight would be able to still be able to provide their feedback into this plan, and then we'd be able to maneuver and massage the overall plan from there.
Any other, okay, I see some more hands raised. So Chris Terrell.
Hi, just a quick question. One of the things I noticed about this proposal is, yes, it's a neighborhood park. A lot of people who live in the area have pointed that out, which to me seems like a great asset. This seems like it would be a big boon for the local businesses, especially restaurants and such, that could service people who want to do something after they go to the park. Was that factored into the planning?
I mean, well, from our standpoint, Jill's and I was just making sure that it's accessible at all times, so that it's there were comments about elements being locked off or at certain times, and that was never the thought. That it's open and well lit and accessible to, well, everyone.
Yeah, it just seems like that this offers a real opportunity to it seems like a real opportunity for some of the local businesses to grow and develop even more with more local foot traffic in the area.
Hi, this is Diana, and I can't find how you raise your hand, so I'm just going to kind of jump in here. That goes to a question that I was asking too. Is there a way to have a public-private cooperation with Vail, which is an excellent partnership in my mind for some of the sports that we're talking about hosting here at this new park? You have lots of other restaurants too, but I believe that Vail is going to bring another influx of people to this area.
And I don't know if anyone from there's on the call this evening, but I think this is certainly an opportunity to open up a dialogue with all of the adjacent businesses and partners to see how we could actually have a public-private cooperation in this, because that's the kind of thing that leads to the uber successful community asset that I think you're looking for. So I know there's contacts with or contact names for some of the adjacent businesses and property owners, and I would suggest that if there is this committee that they reach out, once we sort of get this out to you to discuss possibilities.
Perfect. Shima, I know that y'all have your hand raised as well.
Okay. Myself and my husband, Joe, we represent Richmond Tennis Association. And I am really excited to hear the plan for developing Westover Hills Park. I think it would be a wonderful way to add to the neighborhood and to the school as well. I just wanted to reminisce about how in 2013, this area was dedicated by Mayor Dwight Jones as Westover Hills Tennis Complex. And since then, we've had many tennis programs there, and RTA partner with the City Parks and Rec Department to host many events. And I'm really happy to see more other sports being added to the park, but I would like to make sure that we have at least 6 tennis courts in the complex. Have lessons, clinics, and tournaments. And I think that will be a wonderful addition to the Southside tennis activities. We are trying to work with the Parks and Rec and offer more tennis programs on the South Side. And Westover Hills will play an important role. And just like pickleball, the pandemic has brought resurgent interest in tennis because we, like pickleball, are able to safely distance our players. And we know yesterday I saw a data that said tennis has 22% more players now than before the pandemic. So we expect tennis courts at Westover Hills Complex to get more use as amenities are added and lighting, making it safe and making it more accessible and visible. I think that was a major problem before. People didn't know how to get in there and to access the wonderful amenities. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. We did have another question regarding funding, just in moving forward. So I think that another question to Parks and Rec, as far as just a quick recap on kind of the process of the master plan and kind of how funding moves forward.
Yeah, I actually don't have that answer, Sean. One of few.
That's all right. It's I do know like what Ryan had, just a quick recap what Ryan had stated earlier, and just understanding kind of the next steps for the master plan is, this is the conceptual master plan, and it's just to get more buy-in from the community, kind of figure out what that final master plan is going to look like, and then that goes to the urban design committee just for a review, and then the planning commission just to approve the conceptual master plan, and then at that point they can really start looking at what type of funding they can potentially do. So this would be a phased approach with the full project. So that's just a quick synopsis of what Ryan said. I don't know, Bert and Jill, if I missed anything.
Sounds about right.
I know that there was some questions we saw with speed limit and all that type of stuff. So that's additional things that I think can be asked further to Parks and Rec. But if there's any other, I don't see any other questions coming up. There's been some really great dialogue and some great comments that we've been able to capture. I don't know if anyone else has any final statements that they would like to say or any final questions. Please let us know.
Well, I'll just say on behalf of Jill and I, as the volunteers on this, thank you for spirited, vigorous, and thoughtful input and participation, because as Jill noted, in one of the key points of making a successful public space in a park is that there's participation. And so to reiterate, our next step is to capture all of the comments, questions, suggestions, and see how they sort of reshape what this is, and put this one back out to parks to share through their channels for additional comments and considerations. We'll take all of that and in the near future have a follow-up session where we can present everything we've heard and how we hopefully have responded and framed what you want into something that we can be proud of. I think that's it, Sean.
Yeah, and I just want to say a huge thanks to you, Bert, and you, Jill, for taking their time to volunteer, use their expertise, and pull together these plans, these images, and put forth the effort for this community engagement process. Because a lot of these efforts are community-led and volunteer-led, so we really appreciate you taking the time to do that.
With that, I want to thank everyone. Wish you a lovely evening, and we'll see you again soon across the Zoom. I just made that up on the fly. Okay, all right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.